Breaking news out of Ottawa, and what just unfolded in the past 24 hours represents one of the most catastrophic technology partnership collapses in modern North American history. Canada has officially terminated a $560 billion integrated technology development agreement with Silicon Valley in what industry analysts are calling a calculated economic retaliation that could permanently reshape the global tech landscape. We're not talking about minor contract disputes or temporary freezes. We're talking about 387 active joint ventures suddenly dissolved, $143 billion in shared research and development funding immediately pulled, and over 78,000 cross-border tech workers facing immediate employment uncertainty. The ripple effects hit Wall Street within hours, with major tech stocks plummeting an average of 7% in after-hours trading, wiping out $890 billion in market capitalization before most Americans woke up this morning. In the next 18 minutes, I'm going to break down exactly how a partnership that took 15 years to build collapsed in a single policy announcement, which American tech giants are hemorrhaging billions right now as we speak, and why technology strategists warn this could mark the end of North American tech dominance. The question everyone's asking is this: how did Silicon Valley, the most powerful technology ecosystem on Earth, become this vulnerable to a single diplomatic decision from Ottawa? Let me paint you the picture of what just happened, because understanding the timeline matters. On January 24, 2025, at 9:47 a.m. Eastern Time, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney's office released a 47-page policy directive titled Technology Sovereignty and National Security Framework. Buried in Section 12, Subsection 4, was a single paragraph announcing the immediate termination of the North American Technology Integration Agreement, effective 72 hours from publication. But this didn't happen in a vacuum. This is the culmination of tensions that have been building since the Trump administration's return to power and his escalating technology protectionism policies. To understand how we got here, you need to know that the United States and Canada have maintained the world's most integrated technology partnership since 2010. According to the Peterson Institute for International Economics, this partnership encompassed $560 billion in joint market valuation, included 41% of all artificial intelligence research conducted in North America, and supported direct employment for 167,000 workers across both countries. The agreement allowed seamless movement of engineers, shared intellectual property protections, joint government contracts, and integrated supply chains for everything from semiconductor manufacturing to quantum computing research. By November 2024, warning signs were already visible. The Trump administration had implemented new restrictions requiring Silicon Valley companies to obtain federal approval before sharing advanced AI training data with foreign partners, including Canada. Data from Yale's Budget Lab showed that tech companies reported a 73% increase in compliance costs and delays of 4 to 9 months on previously routine cross-border projects. Then came the trigger event that shattered whatever diplomatic restraint remained. On January 15, 2025, the U.S. Commerce Department abruptly revoked security clearances for 847 Canadian engineers working on classified technology contracts with American defense contractors, citing what they called evolving national security priorities. These weren't recent hires or contractors from unknown companies. These were senior engineers and researchers, some with 15 to 20 years of continuous clearance history, working on projects ranging from satellite systems to cybersecurity infrastructure. According to Federal Reserve economists, the immediate impact was $7 billion in frozen contracts and the collapse of 23 joint ventures that had been operating for over a decade. The Canadian response was swift and devastating. Prime Minister Carney's directive didn't just terminate the partnership. It activated what trade analysts are calling the nuclear option. The policy immediately prohibited Canadian pension funds, which collectively managed $3 trillion in assets, from making new investments in American technology companies. It revoked work permits for 12,400 American tech workers currently employed in Canada. It ended data sharing agreements that Silicon Valley companies relied on for AI training. And perhaps most damaging, it terminated access to Canada's rare earth mineral supplies critical for semiconductor manufacturing. Goldman Sachs analysts reported that within 6 hours of the announcement, major tech stocks entered freefall. Apple dropped 13%, 2%, Microsoft fell 10%, 8%, Google parent Alphabet declined 12%, 4%, and Meta plummeted 7%. The Nasdaq Technology Index posted its worst single-day decline since the 2008 financial crisis. But here's what makes this different from previous trade disruptions or diplomatic tensions. This isn't about tariffs or temporary policy disagreements that can be negotiated away. Canada has systematically identified and severed every critical dependency Silicon Valley developed over 15 years, and they've done it in a way that creates immediate irreversible damage. So how exactly does this economic mechanism work, and why is it devastating Silicon Valley so spectacularly? Let me break this down in simple terms. Think of the US-Canada tech partnership like a massive, interconnected machine that's been running for 15 years. Both countries provided essential components. The United States brought venture capital, market access, and established tech giants. Canada provided top-tier engineering talent, AI research leadership, stable regulatory environment, and critical natural resources. Neither side could operate at full capacity without the other. Now imagine someone doesn't just turn off that machine, but actively removes key components while it's running at full speed. That's what's happening right now. Here's how it works step by step. First, the talent destruction. Silicon Valley technology companies have become structurally dependent on Canadian engineering talent. According to research from the Centre for Strategic and International Studies, Canadian engineers and computer scientists represent 18% of the workforce at major technology companies, but they comprise 31% of senior technical leadership and 44% of AI research teams. These aren't entry-level positions that can be quickly filled. We're talking about people who've spent 10 to 15 years developing proprietary systems, leading critical projects, and training the next generation of engineers. When Canada revoked work permits for American tech workers and ended visa programs that allowed Canadians to work in Silicon Valley, they created an immediate talent crisis that no amount of money can quickly solve. Companies can't simply replace 12,000 specialized engineers with job postings. Training replacements takes years. Projects that were 80% complete are now frozen because the lead engineers have 30 days to leave the country. And it gets worse. The financial mechanism is equally brutal. Canadian pension funds, particularly the Canada Pension Plan Investment Board and Ontario Teachers' Pension Plan, have been among the most aggressive investors in Silicon Valley for the past decade. They provided patient, long-term capital that American venture funds increasingly couldn't match. Data from the National Venture Capital Association shows Canadian institutional investors held equity stakes worth $87 billion in American tech companies as of December 2024. The new policy doesn't force them to immediately sell those positions, which would be catastrophic for market stability. Instead, it does something more insidious. It prohibits any new investments and requires gradual divestment over 24 months. This creates sustained downward pressure on valuations. Tech companies planning new funding rounds suddenly lost access to 20 to 30% of their expected capital. Startups depending on Canadian backing for Series B or Series C rounds are now facing potential bankruptcy. But here's the kicker. The most devastating component is the resource stranglehold. Canada controls 36% of global cobalt production and 22% of global lithium reserves, both absolutely critical for semiconductor and battery manufacturing. The terminated agreement had guaranteed preferential access and stable pricing for American tech manufacturers. Now those supplies are being redirected to European and Asian buyers who've been eager to reduce their dependence on American technology. According to the International Energy Agency, replacing those supply chains will take American companies between 18 and 36 months and increase manufacturing costs by an estimated 28 to 41%. Semiconductor manufacturers are already reporting they have 90 to 120 days of cobalt reserves. After that, production slowdowns become inevitable. The mechanism creates a perfect storm. Talent crisis freezes innovation, capital drought prevents expansion, and supply chain disruption threatens production. And all three hit simultaneously. Let me be crystal clear about who's paying the real price for this catastrophe, because it's not just abstract market losses or corporate balance sheets. Let me tell you about Jennifer Martinez, 34, a senior software architect at a Silicon Valley AI company. Jennifer has been leading a team of 23 engineers developing autonomous vehicle safety systems for the past 4 years. Her project was 91% complete, scheduled for commercial deployment in June 2025, representing $340 million in investment. Jennifer's team included 7 Canadian senior engineers who held the specialized knowledge for the vehicle's real-time decision-making algorithms, systems they'd been developing since 2019. On January 24th, those 7 engineers received termination notices. They have 28 days to return to Canada. Jennifer spent the past 48 hours in emergency meetings trying to figure out how to salvage 4 years of work. The company has no one else who understands the systems these engineers built. Hiring replacements would take 18 to 24 months, and by then, competitors in China and Europe will have captured the market. Jennifer's stock options worth $2. $7 million when she joined the company are now worth approximately $340,000 after the market collapse. But that's not even the worst part for Jennifer. The project cancellation means her team of 23 engineers faces layoffs within 60 days. She's already received calls from recruiters in Singapore and Germany, but moving would mean uprooting her family and abandoning the career she built in Silicon Valley over 12 years. Multiply Jennifer's story by thousands of similar situations across Silicon Valley, and you begin to understand the human toll of this partnership collapse. Then there's Robert Chen, 52, founder and CEO of a semiconductor design startup in San Jose. Robert's company developed specialized chips for quantum computing applications. Over the past 7 years, he built a company worth $890 million, supported by $180 million in funding, 40% of which came from Canadian pension funds. His manufacturing partnership relied on cobalt and lithium supplies from Canada at negotiated rates that were 23% below market price. On January 25th, Robert's Canadian investors informed him they were prohibited from participating in his planned Series D funding round, which was supposed to close in March with $95 million in new capital. His cobalt supplier in Quebec terminated their contract, citing the new policy restrictions. The market price for replacement cobalt supplies would increase his manufacturing costs by 37%, making his products economically unviable against Asian competitors. Robert has 340 employees, average age 41, most with families, mortgages, and children in local schools. He's facing a brutal calculation. He can lay off 60% of his workforce immediately and try to survive with drastically reduced operations, or he can attempt to relocate the entire company to Europe or Asia, which would cost an estimated $47 million he doesn't have, and result in losing 70% of his current staff who can't or won't relocate. His personal net worth has collapsed from $127 million to $31 million in 24 hours as his company's valuation cratered, and it gets worse for workers further down the economic chain. Consider Maria Gonzalez, 28, a cafeteria manager at a major tech campus in Palo Alto. Maria doesn't work directly for a tech company. She works for a food service contractor that operates cafeterias serving 8,400 employees across 3 tech company campuses. She's been with the company for 6 years, working her way up from server to manager. She makes $67,000 annually, has a 3-year-old daughter, and recently qualified for a mortgage on a small condo 45 minutes outside the city. Maria's employers have already informed staff that 2 of their 3 major tech company contracts are being terminated as those companies implement emergency cost-cutting measures. Her cafeteria is scheduled to close on March 15th. Maria and 127 co-workers will lose their jobs. Her industry contacts are telling her that 40 to 50% of similar service positions supporting tech companies are facing elimination over the next 90 days as the crisis deepens. The unemployment benefits she'll receive will cover approximately 55% of her current income, not nearly enough for her mortgage payments or childcare costs. She's already received a notice from her mortgage lender warning that missing payments could trigger foreclosure proceedings. Maria's daughter just started preschool. Now she's facing choices no parent should have to make. Keep the condo and risk foreclosure, or break the lease, damage her credit, and move back in with her parents 120 miles away, which would mean leaving her daughter's school and her entire support network. These aren't isolated stories. Research from the Brookings Institution estimates that for every high-wage tech job lost, 8 additional jobs in supporting industries disappear. We're not just talking about engineers and executives. We're talking about construction workers who built tech campuses, retail workers in areas dependent on tech worker spending, administrative staff, security personnel, transportation workers, food service employees, and countless others whose livelihoods depend on Silicon Valley's prosperity. The human cost of this partnership collapse will be measured in destroyed careers, bankrupted families, and shattered communities across California and beyond. Let me be crystal clear about what experts and analysts are saying about where this catastrophe leads, because the immediate crisis we're witnessing right now is just the beginning. According to testimony before the Senate Commerce Committee this week from economists at MIT's Industrial Performance Center, the partnership termination creates three distinct waves of consequences, each more severe than the last. The first wave, which we're experiencing right now, is what they're calling the immediate disruption phase. This lasts 30 to 90 days. We're seeing project cancellations, emergency layoffs, stock market hemorrhaging, and supply chain chaos. The Peterson Institute estimates this phase alone will destroy between $180 billion and $240 billion in market value and eliminate approximately 47,000 direct jobs in the technology sector. But experts warn that's just the visible damage. The Center for Strategic and International Studies released an analysis showing that for every $1 billion in tech sector losses, an additional $2. $3 billion in economic activity across related industries disappears. That means the true economic impact of this first wave could exceed $650 billion when you account for the cascading effects through real estate, retail, professional services, and local governments dependent on tech sector tax revenue. The second wave, which analysts expect to hit between 6 and 12 months from now, involves what trade economists call structural market reorientation. Here's what they're not telling you. Canada isn't just walking away from American technology partnerships. They're actively redirecting those resources and relationships toward European and Asian competitors. Reports from the Financial Times confirm that Canadian officials have already held preliminary discussions with the European Union about expanding technology cooperation agreements. China has reportedly offered Canadian research institutions $12 billion in joint venture funding, specifically targeting AI and quantum computing projects that were previously exclusive to US-Canada collaboration. According to analysis from the Council on Foreign Relations, within 12 months we could see the emergence of alternative technology ecosystems that explicitly exclude American companies. Canadian engineering talent will flow to companies in Berlin, Singapore, and Shanghai instead of San Francisco and Seattle. Research breakthroughs that would have benefited American companies will instead advance foreign competitors. Supply chains for critical technology manufacturing will permanently bypass American firms. The Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco estimates this second wave could result in a permanent loss of 15 to 22% of Silicon Valley's competitive advantage in key technology sectors. But here's what really concerns analysts, and why the third wave represents an existential threat to American technology leadership. We're looking at what economists call permanent structural displacement. Dr. Sarah Mitchell at Stanford's Center on Global Economic Development explains it this way. Technology leadership isn't just about having smart people and capital. It's about having an integrated ecosystem where talent, funding, research, manufacturing, and market access all reinforce each other. Silicon Valley became dominant precisely because it built that ecosystem over decades. The Canada partnership was a critical component. It provided the talent pipeline, the research capacity, the stable resources, and the international legitimacy that made the ecosystem work. Once that ecosystem fragments, according to historical analysis of previous technology leadership transitions, it doesn't come back. The World Economic Forum's 2024 Technology Competitiveness Report warned that we could be witnessing the beginning of a shift similar to what happened when American manufacturing leadership migrated to Asia between 1980 and 2010. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens gradually as talent flows to wherever the opportunities are best, as capital follows the talent, as supply chains adapt to new realities, and as competitors in other regions build their own integrated ecosystems. Treasury Department analysts, speaking on condition of anonymity, have reportedly warned the White House that if current trajectory continues, the United States could lose its position as the world's dominant technology innovator within a decade. Companies like Apple, Google, and Microsoft will survive, but they'll increasingly conduct their most advanced research and development outside the United States, in regions where talent and resources are more accessible. The long-term consequence isn't the collapse of American technology companies. It's the slow, irreversible migration of technology innovation away from American soil. Let's recap the three critical points you need to understand about this crisis. First, who's paying the real price? The immediate victims are the 78,000 cross-border tech workers facing employment uncertainty, the thousands of engineers whose projects are frozen or cancelled, and the 47,000 direct job losses in the next 90 days. But the true cost extends to the 200,000 plus workers in supporting industries, from cafeteria staff to construction workers whose livelihoods depend on Silicon Valley's prosperity. Families facing foreclosure, parents unable to afford childcare, workers in their 50s who'll never recover their career trajectory. The human toll of this partnership collapse will reverberate through communities for years. Second, the scale of economic destruction. We're not talking about temporary market corrections or normal business cycle downturns. We're talking about $890 billion in market capitalization wiped out in hours. We're talking about $560 billion in integrated technology partnerships dissolved overnight. We're talking about supply chain disruptions that will increase manufacturing costs by 28 to 41% and take 18 to 36 months to resolve. We're talking about funding gaps that will bankrupt promising startups and freeze innovation across entire technology sectors. The Peterson Institute estimates the total economic impact could exceed $650 billion when accounting for cascading effects, making this one of the most expensive policy failures in modern American economic history. Third, the permanent consequences that keep analysts up at night. This isn't a temporary disruption that will resolve once diplomatic relations improve. Canada has systematically severed dependencies that took 15 years to build. They've redirected talent pipelines, research partnerships, investment capital, and critical resources toward competitors in Europe and Asia. According to the Council on Foreign Relations, we're potentially witnessing the beginning of a fundamental shift in global technology leadership, similar to the manufacturing migration to Asia that permanently altered America's industrial landscape. The Federal Reserve warns that Silicon Valley could lose 15 to 22% of its competitive advantage within 12 months, and Treasury analysts privately admit we could lose our position as the world's dominant technology innovator within a decade. If you're a tech worker, an investor in technology companies, or anyone whose livelihood depends on the technology sector, you need to understand that what happened this week isn't just another policy dispute that will blow over. This is a structural fracture in the foundation of American technology dominance. Here's what keeps me up at night. We're not just losing a trade agreement or a diplomatic partnership. We're losing something far more valuable and far harder to rebuild. We're losing the integrated ecosystem of talent, capital, research, and resources that made American technology leadership possible. We're losing the trust and cooperation of partners who spent 15 years building joint ventures with us. We're losing our position as the inevitable destination for the world's best engineers and most ambitious innovators. And once that ecosystem fragments, once that talent flows elsewhere, once competitors build their own integrated systems that exclude us, no amount of policy changes or diplomatic repairs will bring it back. The question we should all be asking is this: how many more foundational partnerships will we destroy before we recognize that isolation doesn't make us stronger? It makes us obsolete?